I am Barry Zorostein. It's a cold night in Sydney, hence beanie. I wanted to look at today the challenges facing veterans transitioning into civilian life. I think the first challenge veterans often discuss with me when I've sat with them is just how complex they find civilian life. They often say we'd give anything to go back into the military. And when I go, well, what's that about for you? They go, well, for one thing, I belonged. I belonged to a tribe. We wore the same uniform. We had a passion for where we were. We were a brotherhood. We were a tribe. We were a community. We got a really deep sense of shared meaning between each other. There was a shared focus. And we also held on to similar values. And, values in the military are extremely strong. I'm not saying that good or bad stuff, especially negative stuff, doesn't happen in the military, but generally, this is an environment that people feel deeply connected to. And so the first thing is when they do transition into civilian life is where do I belong? Who am I? In many ways, what you do, the uniform you wear, the rank you carry, the skills you have in the military define who you are. That sense of purpose, that sense of goal, that sense of direction. Talking to numbers of special force operators over the years, we're dealing with extremely intelligent human beings, highly focused, able to multitask, and we're responsible for millions of dollars of equipment, and we're making decisions every day that could impact on other people's lives. And seeing so many of them come back into civilian life and not being able to find a place for their skill set. The skill set in the military often doesn't have a place in civilian life. And so they arrive back in the civilian world and, now what? Who are they? Where is their status? Where is their skill set? And often for me to see veterans like this, and any veteran, whether working in manual jobs, struggling to earn a living, on the streets, homeless, it's a tragedy. I know there's a lot of work being done and support being done to help veterans make that transition and re-find meaning in civilian life and re-find themselves and redefine who they are. But it is still an incredible challenge for coming out of uniform, coming out of the military world and arriving in civilian world. The other thing guys share with me is that in civilian world, everything feels really random to them. They struggle with the random behaviors that happen in any place. You can be in a shopping center and be given a rough time. You can go on the roads and somebody cuts you off. They find it a constant barrage. There's very little order to them. It's haphazard and often can be experienced as extremely overwhelming and also have a profound lack of meaning. So, you have individuals who no longer know how to redefine themselves. They have skill sets that were valued and no longer have a place in the territory they just entered. And they're facing a random, and what to them is a random and disorganized experience. So where do they go? What do they do? Well, we know that veterans struggle to the level that they have to cope with anxiety, stress, overwhelm, depression, the use of alcohol as a self-medication. This is all symptomatic, not just of adjustment issues in civilian territory, clearly not. There are also PTSD or trauma-based issues that impact on folk as well. But we do know that we're looking at two very different territories and there's no rule book to show you how to move into another territory. The second thing is that for those veterans that have also had a lot of operational experience or seen and done things or experienced things that have had a huge impact on them and resulted in either a certain level of trauma or, full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder. Now we're dealing with another layer of adjustment challenge. The traumatized brain doesn't necessarily move into civilian life and go, oh, I'm safe and I can let go of everything. It doesn't work like that. The brain at war does not differentiate between being at war and then being in civilian life. The brain at war is always at war. Hence, we see veterans coming back into civilian life, hitting the ground when a car backfires, having to face doors, having to face the doors in restaurants, weapons placed strategically around the house, checking doors and windows. And I've often said that, veterans, and certainly, when I began working with Vietnam veterans probably about 14, 15 years ago, they would bring the war home so that their wives and kids then became hypervigilant. Hypervigilant because of the fact that they were creating an operational territory in their own home, and also their very poor impulse control, anger. They would find it very difficult to contain their anger, could be highly reactive, and so their wives and children began to walk around on eggshells as much as veterans in operational territory began to walk around in states of hypervigilance. So it's an immensely challenging journey, and what we do know is that to be able to transition into civilian life, you also need to be able to heal your trauma. Now, there are lots of modalities out there, and everybody will access veteran services in the area and hopefully get the support they need to heal those wounds. The next thing is that transitioning from the military into civilian life does not mean leaving your veteran behind. I feel very strongly that an effective transition is where you transition your warrior into your civilian world. I think there are incredible values of being a warrior. These are men and women who have gone to places and experienced things and been challenged deeply personally in ways that very, very few people are often challenged. These are men and women who have persevered through adjusting to the military world. They've demonstrated endurance, strength, reliability, dependability. Why would we want to lose that? These are men who have a strong reliance on each other and can trust another. Again, why would we want to lose that? I think these are values that the civilian world can really do more with. And so part of what I do when working with veterans is to really encourage them to reclaim their warrior. It's not to get lost in the warrior identity. So you're walking around, wearing your medals, carrying your uniform, marching from place to place. It's not about that. It's about the warrior as it represents your internal strength, your internal values, and stand tall in that. And as you begin to transition into the civilian world, I always say, look, let your warrior and your civilian walk hand in hand together. They both can exist. It's not that when you leave one world, you close the door and walk into the other world. You don't. There's a flow through. And I think that flow through where you can still appreciate your veteran or your warrior while you are operating as a civilian does support veterans in the healing process. The other transition challenge that I've increasingly come across is what we call a moral injury. Now, moral injury has probably two components to it. The one component, which I'm not going to get into now, is where you have experienced something on operations that you are struggling to process. It might have been seeing the death of a child, it might be seeing a friend die, it might be something that you were called to do to survive. That is almost like a crack in the soul, so to speak, and a difficult one to work through. But the moral injury I'd like to discuss today is when your own organization becomes the enemy. And this I've seen on a number of occasions with veterans where, for whatever reason, a minor injury or a major hiccup emotionally, or simply because they were just not liked. Whoever was above them in rank took a dislike to them and decided they were going to get them out of their unit. And in this case, they are targeted, they're discriminated against, and they are bullied. Now, for me, that's a major issue. It's enough of a struggle for veterans to fight wars, but when your war becomes the tribe that you have trusted and lived in, that's another story and something I really do find quite distasteful. But it does happen. And I've seen the traumatic impacts that this has on high-functioning soldiers. It impacts on them to the level of almost disintegrating their sense of self-worth. I've seen them where they can't get near their medals, they can't own their sense of being a warrior, they will not go and march in any ceremonies, they feel they've lost the right, they feel diminished and they feel demeaned. So the impact is huge. When you take away someone's identity, and we know that even bullying in civilian life, in schools, people kill themselves because of being bullied. Well, in the military, it's grown-up men doing a highly focused level of discrimination and bullying against other individuals, it can have a huge impact. So you're not just almost cast out from your tribe, you're cast out with no meaning and no sense of worth. So that's another thing that I've seen veterans struggle with in their adjustment to civilian life, and looking back and having to process the discrimination, having to refine themselves and reclaim themselves. So adjustment it's a complex issue, but it certainly can be managed effectively as veterans learn to target and heal the various parts in themselves and slowly bridge over into a new way of operating. So I hope that makes sense to all of you. I'm looking forward to hearing from any of you if you want to contact me. All you have to do is go to my website, www.barrysworestine, that's BARRYZWORESTINE.com. You have capability there to leave a message, send me a voice message, and make contact with me. There's also the Instagram and the Facebook author group you're welcome to join. And if you are struggling and you haven't yet seen somebody, just go and look at my blog, which has a number of tools. They're not mine, they're just things that I have used over the years with veterans and found very effective. And just have a look through those. I really recommend the tapping, the 4-7-8 breathing, and the energy exercises, as they really do help. They'll put you back in your body. And then, if you like some of the extracts, have a look at my book. I've kept the Kindle as cheap as possible. There's also the book itself you can buy. Otherwise, I look forward to hearing from you, and good to connect with you. Take it easy. Have a good week. Cheers. Bye.